Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video will be entitled The Disappearance of Emanuela Orlandi. Of course, I'm talking about the disappearance of a 15-year-old young woman from the Vatican City, Rome. And this is on June 22nd, 1983. I don't know if you can remember where you were. That was a Wednesday, midweek. Emanuela Orlandi was a resident of the Vatican City. She lived inside the Holy See walls. Emanuela Orlandi was born January 14th, 1968. That would make her age 54 today if she were alive, which I seriously doubt. She was a Vatican teenager who lived with her family in the Holy See. She was one of 5 children. She had an older brother, and she had 3 sisters. Emanuela Orlandi was the 4th of 5 children, second to youngest. She mysteriously disappeared while she was outside the Holy City, taking a flute lesson. Not too far from St. Peter's Square, to the east of the square, the Grand Piazza. She was at the Pontifical Institute of Sacred Music, which has another building that's just off St. Peter's Square. It's called the Scuola di Musica Tommaso. It's only 1,000 meters from where she lived. So I've heard stories that she was waiting for the bus. This is absurd. She can easily walk from her parents' home inside the Vatican City to her flute lessons. She took flute lessons 3 times per week. There are numerous sightings of Emanuela Orlandi over the decades and the years after her disappearance. These sightings have included inside and outside the Vatican City and around Rome. The girl's disappearance has led to much speculation of the involvement of international terrorism, Italian organized crime, the Banco Ambrigiano, which, as you know, was presided over by Roberto Calfi, who himself was murdered just 1 year exactly before Emanuela Orlandi disappeared. I'm going to go through a chronology with you in a moment. Anyway, there's all kinds of speculation that there's a plot or a conspiracy inside the Holy See to cover up a sex scandal. Well, first of all, let's get our facts straight, okay? The Holy See of Vatican is a Swiss bank, okay? It's a money laundering facility. So, and that's its #1 purpose. That's why there's Swiss guards with weapons in the Holy See. It's to guard the bank records, nothing to do with the valuable artwork that may be underneath in the catacombs. It's primarily there as a banking security center. The Orlandi family, worked for the Holy See. Emanuela's father's name is Ercole Orlandi. He worked in the Pope's household. We were on to Pope John Paul II, because remember, John Paul I was murdered and done away with on September 28th, 1978. Again, that's going to be part of my chronology. Pope John Paul I was murdered, I believe, by a cyanide-laced cup of tea on his 33rd day of papacy. 33. That's what I said. Pope John Paul I's real name was Albino Luciani. Very close to the name of Lucky Luciano, whose real name, in case you didn't know, Lucky Luciano, his true name, he was also murdered, I believe, by a cyanide-laced cup of tea at the Naples airport, a port facility. Salvatore Luciania, very similar name to Albino Luciani, who is known as Pope John Paul I, murdered on his 33 days in papacy. Now, the reason I say he was murdered is that anytime you die 33 days into your term and they embalm your body without an autopsy, I'm calling that a murder, okay? That's based on my experience with investigating military intelligence, bank money laundering, clandestine service, crimes. Murder most foul. Anyway, I know this is sounds like I'm digressing, but I'm really not, because Emanuela Orlandi is, through no fault of her own, is in a hornet's nest of criminal activity. Now, is there a sex scandal? Hey, probably. Why not? I mean, there's every other kind of scandal. Paul Marcinkus is the president of the Bank of Vatican while all this is going down. He's from Cicero, Illinois. You know where Al Capone is from, where Jose Menendez worked at the Lion Container Company, where Jack Ruby is from, Jacob Rubenstein. He's from Cicero, Illinois. You know, that's where Seymour Hersh, the fake investigative journalist with a Pulitzer Prize for cracking the My Lai massacre, he's from Chicago. Hey, and so there's a Jewish economist that everyone loves, Milton Friedman. He's from Chicago also. So what I want you to know is that Chicago seems to be quite a hub. Al Capone, Jack Ruby, Jose Menendez, Seymour Hersh, Milton Friedman, Sam Giancana, handsome Johnny Roselli spent time working in the Chicago zip code for organized crime, aka OSS and CIA. And so is Paul Marcinkus. So I'm running out of fingers, but Paul Marcinkus, Al Capone, Jack Ruby, Jose Menendez, Seymour Hersh, Milton Friedman, Sam Giancana, Johnny Roselli. That's 8 military intelligence operatives coming out of Cicero. One of them happened to be the president of the Bank of Vatican for 18 years, from 1971 through 1989. Paul Marcinkus has been in the city of Vatican since 1950. So he spent most of his life in the Holy See. Paul Marcinkus lived a full life. He died at Sun City, Arizona, outside of Phoenix, at the age of 84 years old. So nobody whacked Paul Marcinkus, but almost every person who worked with him got whacked. I will go through the list in a moment. Anyway, getting back to Emanuela Orlandi, I'm going to base my talk today on an article that was written about a mysterious woman by the name of Sabrina Minardi. She was the girlfriend of a organized crime figure in Rome, Italy, whose name was Enrico de Pettis. And Enrico de Pettis was an associate of Paul Marcinkus, the president of the Bank of Vatican. You should know that Paul Marcinkus worked very closely with both Michele Sindona from Messina, Sicily, who had an office in Long Island, New York, and was the president of the National Franklin National Bank of Long Island. The Franklin National Bank of Long Island was managed by Michele Sindona, who's from Messina, Sicily, and he takes care of the 5 crown families of New York. If you're wondering what happened to his accounts after he was murdered by a cyanide-laced cup of tea in a woman's prison in 1986, you should know it's all part of Citigroup now. So direct all your questions to Jane Fraser, who's a Scottish woman, who's the CEO of Citigroup, and she went to Harvard to get an MBA from Harvard Business School, and she's from another country, and she's the president of Citigroup, and she took over Michele Sindona's bank accounts for the 5 crime families of New York. Anyway, he also worked very closely with Roberto Calfi, and also, don't forget, William Egan Colby, who was station chief of Rome, Italy, in the 1950s, until he was reassigned to Saigon, Vietnam, where William Colby became the station chief of Saigon and station chief for the Far East Division of CIA. then later in charge of the Kurds program, and then in charge of Operation Phoenix, political terrorism. What was going on in Rome, Italy during the time that William Colby was there, and when Sharon Tate was there, and Sharon Tate's father was there, and Nicole Brown's father, Louis Brown, was there, was Operation Gladio, which, in case you don't know, that means by the sword. By the sword. That was going on in Italy. All right, so there's an article regarding this woman, this woman who was previously involved with a professional soccer player and broke up, and then of course Netflix is doing a film on this, I'm told, this year. So you know Netflix is clandestine service all the way. So you know that the Emanuela Orlandi story's got to be something to do with the clandestine services and military intelligence. Anyway, this 15-year-old girl who left her home to attend a music class but never returned home, again, that was on Wednesday, June 22nd, 1983. I know where I was. I know where I was. While all sorts of theories have developed about what might have happened to her, the Vatican remains at the very center of every one of the conspiracy theories. This woman, Sabrina Minardi, has come forward with details. She's also been interviewed by the Carbonari, and she has also been harassed with legal accusations of drug trafficking and complicity with her ex-boyfriend, Enrico de Pitas. Okay, she had a close association with him in... All right, so let me just read on. If you dig further into this case, you will find that Sabrina Minardi is a treasure trove of minutiae of details involving Paul Marcinkus and her boyfriend, Enrico Pettis. And according to her, her boyfriend ordered the kidnapping of Emanuela Orlandi by 3 of his soldiers. And again, Operation Gladio works in teams of 3. So that makes sense. That makes sense that it would be a team of 3 that would kidnap Emanuela before she could return back to the Holy See. She claims that the girl was drugged and that she was taken to a suburb of Rome and kept there for several days until her boyfriend, Enrico Pettis, ordered her to be taken to the coast where his parents lived. I guess they have a family home right on the water with a grotto with a windowless cell, and that she was taken there. It's 48 kilometers, which is about 30 miles away from the Holy See. And that the story from Sabrina is that Emanuela Orlandi was drugged. She was kept in a home outside of Rome. Then she was repositioned to the coast, about 30 miles to the west. The town is called Tarva Inica, or Tarva Inica, coastal town. It is less than 3 miles north of Naples. That's important because Naples is a port facility. It's 248 kilometers north of Naples. It's 45 kilometers from the Holy See, or 46 kilometers from where Emanuela Orlandi was taking her flute lessons. It's 46 kilometers from there. But like I said, she was taken to a safe house. Then she was taken to the coast. Then she was repositioned weeks later to the center of Italy, to a place called Monte Verde, which is a high mountain village, which she was remained for a period of time. Then she was returned to the coast, back to Enrico Pettis's parents' home at Torva Enica, whereupon she was murdered. And she was put in a sack and put into a cement mixer for storage. I've heard numerous theories of what happened to her. I heard that she was poured with concrete into some new construction on a coastal town. I don't know what coastal town. I'm going to assume it was Torvianica. I don't know. But this comes up where she's associated with cement and a cement mixer. So I'm going to say she got put into a foundation of a building. Don't have a date on that, obviously. Anyway, according to Sabrina Minardi, she claims to have seen Emanuela Orlandi being transferred from one of her boyfriend's soldiers into a Bank of Vatican license plate limousine and driven away. Sabrina goes on to say that she delivered cash money in Louis Vuitton bags to Paul Marcinkus that her boyfriend had given her. It's part of their money laundering that they do. It's kind of puzzling to me, you know, the direction of the cash. Normally the cash seems like it would go from the Bank of Vatican, which of course goes by the acronym IOR, Institute of Religious Studies. Normally the cash goes to the organized crime facility, but in this case it was going from the organized criminal back to the president of the Bank of Vatican. It doesn't really matter. It could easily happen in both directions, as I've learned from my money laundering auditing. Unauthorized auditing, because there are no authorized audits of the Bank of Vatican, right? Which seems to be the problem that Pope John Paul I had. He wanted to order an audit of the Bank of Vatican, and of course he drank his tea and died. So that's that. There was never an audit of the Bank of Vatican. So we have Louis Vuitton bags being delivered to Paul Marcinkus. We have Paul Marcinkus coming from Cicero, Illinois, which is a hotbed of clandestine service, CIA, OSS, military intelligence, port facility, clandestine service. Of course, that would make sense that the one of the alumni there would become president of the Bank of Vatican for 18 years. Anyway, there's been a number of corroborations that the Carabinieri did with Sabrina Minardi's story. They did find some ambiguities in it, but for the most part, she seemed to corroborate a lot of independent investigations. So it sounds like she knew something about the kidnapping of Emanuela Orlandi. All right, I'll post the article here and you can read it for yourself. She's still alive. She's living in Rome to this day. She has a drug addiction issue she battles. Why am I not surprised? Based on my other videos that I've done regarding William Colby, who went on to become the director of CIA after the Watergate burglaries, plural. There were at least 3 burglaries. We don't only talk about one. Anyway, Paul Castellano comes into this story. You know, he was the head of the Gambino crime family of New York City. And Paul Castellano was born in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. I'm going to go down a list of people that are tangentially associated with the story. First, we have Lucky Luciano, whose real name is Salvador Luciancia, and he was murdered by cyanide tea on January 26, 1962. The reason I bring him up is he was murdered by cyanide tea at age 64. Then we have, I'm going to skip forward, we have Johnny Roselli murdered and stuffed into a 55-gallon oil drum and dumped into Biscayne Bay. That was August 9th, 1976. He was 71 years old. The year earlier, we had Sam Giancana murdered in Oak Park, Illinois, Chicago. He was 67 years old, shot in the face, I believe, 6 times. And that was June 19th, 1975. Sam Giancana was 67 years old. Johnny Roselli was 71 years old. Then we have Pope John I, who was murdered 33 days into his papacy at age 65. And I believe he was murdered with cyanide tea. So that's 2. We had Lucky Luciano and then we had Pope John Paul I, and those are both cyanide tea murders. Then we had Roberto Calfi, who was murdered by an orange rope with a love knot hung from the Blackfriars Masonic Bridge in central London on June 17, 1982, at age 62. Then we had the kidnapping of Emanuela Orlandi, age 15, on June 22, 1983, which is exactly 1 year and 5 days after the murder of Roberto Calfi, who was the president of Ambrosiano Bank in Milan, Italy, who was the #1 money launderer for the Bank of Vatican, Holy See. So Roberto Calfi is up to his eyeballs with Paul Marcinkus and Michele Sindona, that I'm going to get to his murder in a moment. After Emanuela Orlandi was murdered, Paul Castellano in Manhattan was murdered at the Sparks Steakhouse. Paul Castellano was age 70. That murder occurred on December 16, 1985 in Manhattan. Then we had Michele Sindona be killed 6 months later after Paul Castellano. He's associated with Paul Castellano as one of his customers. He's associated with Roberto Calfi. He may know Emanuela Orlandi. He certainly knows William Colby of the CIA. Anyway, Michele Sindona is murdered in a woman's prison by cyanide tea, or cyanide cappuccino. And that was March 22nd, 1986. That's 3 CIA operatives murdered by cyanide-laced tea or cappuccino. That's 3. Then we have William Egan Colby himself. After he retired from the CIA, if there is such a thing as retirement, he's murdered in his kitchen at Rock Point, Maryland at age 76 on April 27, 1996. William Colby goes bye-bye. And we know he was murdered in his kitchen because when his body was found 9 days later in a place that the Navy SEALs searched for 4 days, he had undigested steamed clams and steamed corn in his belly, which was found in his kitchen when they discovered him missing. So in other words, he never finished his dinner. His half-eaten dinner, half of it was in his belly and half of it was in the bowl that was placed on the kitchen counter in his cabin at Rock Point, Maryland. So he was murdered that night of April 27, 1996. I'm just going to throw it out and say 8:45 to 9 p.m. at night. William Egan Colby, the head of Operation Phoenix Terrorism in Vietnam, the Cords program, the cleaning up of the Watergate burglary by lying better than Richard Helms could do, and his activities in Rome, Italy with the Holy See and Operation Gladio by the sword. He went wherever directors of CIA go. And in the middle of all of these murders is the disappearance of Emanuela Orlandi, age 15. Don't you find that more than a coincidence? I do. All right, well, that's it for this. I wish I had more information as to the whereabouts of Emanuela Orlandi. I mean, they've looked in the catacombs in the Holy See, came up with nothing. They've looked at the grotto. They've looked at the grotto and around the property where she allegedly was taken, according to Sabrina Minardi, which was at Torvyanica, and they never found her remains there. So I believe she's in a concrete foundation, possibly, you know, like Jimmy Hoffa might be. Just look for what buildings were under construction. The problem with the Emanuela Orlandi disappearance is it appears that she was repositioned to a number of safe houses, at least 3 different locations, before she was murdered. So it's impossible to know when exactly she died, so it's impossible to know what foundations were being poured, and we don't even know which city she was in when she died. So there's just so much we don't know. It's kind of sort of like the Aaron Valente case, age 33, done away with and gone missing for 5 days before she magically is discovered 26 miles south of Sand Hill Road in Almaden Valley near Diablo Way on Bowes Lane. Aaron Valente, Emanuela Orlandi. It's quite a list. I mean, you know, if you want me to add Judy Garland, I can. Cass Elliot, Marilyn Monroe, Sharon Tate, Abigail Folger. If you want me to list the number of women who have been murdered who are involved with the CIA and social engineering, it is a long list. I mean, it's going to be as long as the My Lai massacre, okay? There's a bunch of women that got killed. And they're all, in that case, none of them were in the Screen Actors Guild. None of them were social engineers. They were murdered to scare the bejesus out of all the other, you know, folks in that area. And to test, it's kind of a beta test for COVID. Can you get neighbors to rat each other out? Well, yeah, you can. Can you get neighbors to wear face diapers and other neighbors not to? Yeah, you can. Some people comply, some people don't. That's what the My Lai massacre was about. That's what Operation Phoenix is about. That's what Operation Gladio is about. So political terrorism to psych out using fear porn and shelter-in-place metrics to take total control, pacification and control of a society. That's Bank Anthropology 101. That's my point. Have a great day. Please like and subscribe to my channel and share my videos because sadly I am shadow banned. Have a great day.